afternoon. Thank you. It's 3 o'clock. It's WAMPO time. All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this month's Wichita Area Metropolitan Planning Organization on Tuesday, April 11th, 2023 at 3 p.m. We will go ahead and jump into the meeting. The first agenda item that we have is approval of the April 11th, 2023 agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve. A second? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? All right, item passes unanimously. The next agenda item is to approve the minutes from March 14th, 2023. I would entertain a motion to approve. Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? All right, the motion passes unanimously. The next we have is Chad with the director's report. So Chad, wow us.
Madam Chair, thank you so much. Members of the Transportation Planning Body, good afternoon. Report to you some items today and the agenda today as well. There are many items today on the agenda, primarily because transportation system has so many areas that it touches lives of public as well. Jobs, access to jobs and economy, environment and many areas. So today we have several of those, and staff strives to quantify some of those impacts of transportation system. One of the impacts of transportation system is economy, and staff took a new initiative on how do we illustrate that relationship between transportation system and economic development. And we have Jeremy Hill and his staff today from Wichita State University to present to us how those two are interacting. And they have developed some indices. That's one of the items on the agenda. There are also a couple of action items. You have approved amendments over an year, and a few amendments of TPB amendments take place that seeks your approval. That's on the agenda today. One other item we have, the most important is the 2022 year audit. We have Michael Gerber from Forvis here as well that will be presenting today. And federal certification review is coming up on May 10th to 12th. 10th, 11th, 12th are Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Ava Stayman from Federal Transit Administration is here to present those dates for you pretty soon. And then I invite you, if your schedule permits, to provide feedback to staff and how well we can improve, how well the operations in WAMPO can be further improved. With that overall view of the agenda, let me dive into some of the reports that we have on the ongoing tasks. The first item we have on our list is the Unified Planning Board Program Quarterly Task Report. We have included, what is the progress we made in our task list in this packet. And then this slide on this, thanks to our Transportation Planning Manager, Ashley Byers, very well compiled this and shown what's the status and timeline and all. And this is something our chair has designed the template, and it's good to share with you all this template. So the various tasks and how we are making progress on this is there. Let me go to the next slide on this. I think at this time, let us welcome our Ava Stein from Federal Transit Administration to present the open house and the certification review for the WAMPO. Thank you, Madam Chair.
On the side there. But yeah, so I am Ava Steinman. I am the community planner for FTA Region 7. We're based out of Kansas City, have a 4-state area. And then my partner is Cecily Cochran with the Federal Highway Administration. She's with the Kansas division, but transferring over or kind of transitioning to the Missouri division here. But for the purposes of this review, she will be partnering with me for the joint review over the WAMPO planning area for our certification review. So certification reviews happen every 4 years. I don't know how many of you are around and remember the 2019 review that happened in, the site visit was in early June of that, back in 19. I had just started with FTA, so I actually was there for a little bit of the review, but pretty new, so you may not have interacted with me much at that point. But yeah, it's already been 4 years and up for our next round of this. So the purpose of the review is just kind of to do an overall review of all of the different planning products and processes of the Wichita area planning organization. And so we do that for every MPO, so every planning organization that has a population of at least 200,000 or more. And so we begin by looking at kind of doing what we call the desk review. So this is when we really do a deep dive into all the agreements and planning products, such as like the long range plan, the TIP over the years, all the different UPWPs since the last review. We just really look at how all of those interact comprehensively together and look for either areas of improvement or also things that are WAMPO's doing really well that we can use for examples for other areas as in the region or country too there. And so that's kind of the stage that we're at right now. We're doing the desk review. We've actually sent out a questionnaire to the MPO staff, and they're working on answering those questions for us that'll assist us in our desk review. And then, so the next step will be the site visit that Chad mentioned here. And so that's happening in May. That'll be May 10th, 11th, and 12th. We'll kind of start in the early afternoon of the 10th. And then on the 11th will be really the majority of the review. That one's going to be kind of a little bit of a long day, because then at the end of the site visit, the review questions there, we're actually going to have a public meeting, because public participation is part of the review process too. We give the public a chance to give us any comment. We have a survey out that WAMPO staff has been kind enough to circulate to listserv and also post in the newspaper for public comment there. There's a couple questions, and then also just an opportunity. We have our contact information there, so if there's anyone that wants to just kind of reach out and tell us how WAMPO's doing, there's that opportunity. And so the site visit, after that portion, we'll do a wrap up on the Friday the 12th, and the site visit will be between Federal Highway, FTA, KDOT. We'll have representatives here. Wichita Transit will also be involved. We'll all be meeting with MPO staff. We'll take all of our findings back, kind of talk amongst ourselves, and prepare a final report. And so that final report will be being compiled kind of over the month of June is when we'll really be working on that. And sometime early July-ish is probably whenever we'll have it out for everyone to look over, see if there's anything that we need to tweak with it. And then as part of the report and as a result of our site visit and all of our research and everything, there will be compiling our federal findings. So there's 3 different options of a finding. You'll have either commendations, recommendations, and corrective actions are possible. We hope not any of those, because those are things that you then have to address that are kind of related to a federal regulation that maybe which WAMPO could improve on. But typically it's recommendations and commendations. Commendations are things that you're doing well. Recommendations are areas for improvement. Once we compile all of the findings and the final report, we will recertify WAMPO for an additional 4 years. And the deadline for that is end of July 31st. So that's what we're working towards, and I kind of gave you here this roadmap there of all the different steps in that process. And then if we could advance to the final slide here. This is the contact information for Cecily, my counterpart at Federal Highway, and myself. So if you guys do have any questions, or if there's any comments that you want to send to us about how WAMPO's been doing over the last 4 years, I welcome your participation in the review itself, or to reach out prior or even a couple days after would be fine as well too, to give us your feedback. Are there any questions right now for me? I know I kind of went through that fast and we have a lot on the agenda, but I wanted to give you guys at least a introduction to what's coming up here next month.
Any questions? You can see her email and her phone number. So please, everybody send your fabulous comments about how awesome WAMPO is as soon as you can, right? Run, don't walk.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for being here and for your presentation. Chad.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Eva. The next item, we have a long-range transportation plan that's due in May 2025. So there's so many activities that are lined up. Staff is diligently working towards various components of it. A few of them are, I want to take a moment to thank all the staff, Ashley, Alicia, Nick, Emily, Dora. All of them are really diving into this transportation plan. So Ashley has a overall summary of the status on some of the RFPs that are prepared and now open for consulting firms to provide. So let us request Ashley to present this. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you. Hi there, I'm Ashley Byers, the Transportation Planning Manager here at WAMPO. So the Regional Transit Implementation Plan, that RFP is going to close on April 21st. And that is all about looking about how we can coordinate and collaborate with transit providers. The Video Consultation Services RFP is closing on April 17th. And that actually came from Troy because you suggested we make a video. And so it was like, maybe we should make a lot of videos. And so we're hoping to hire someone to help us make videos. The automatic bike ped counters RFP is still in the works. We're trying to figure out a few things before we release it. And we might end up doing a request for information first so we can get some more information for the RFP. Would you like me to go on to this, Chad? Okay. Okay. So the MTP 2050 Planning Assistance Contract was signed at our last TPB meeting, and we've had our kickoff meeting with the consultants last week. And so we are really going to be ramping up with the public engagement very soon. We have another meeting about that tomorrow. And so we're very excited. And again, if you have anywhere that you'd like us to present, please let us know and we will be there. We're going to be at District 3 on May 1st at the CAB. So looking forward to that. Okay. And on our Comprehensive Safety Action Plan project, or the CSAP, we had the Transportation Safety Technical Advisors, or TSTA meeting, the second one on March 28th. And it was a very productive meeting where we talked about benchmarks and data and safety prioritizations. And so now we're reviewing all of that, and we're going to have a third TSTA meeting fairly soon with a public meeting before the third meeting. We don't have that quite planned out yet, but once we have that date, we will let you all know. And we had our kickoff meeting for the Economic Development and Transportation Committee yesterday. Thank you to the Wichita State people in the room. It went, I think, very well. We had a lot of good conversations, and some of that information will be discussed later on in today's meeting. The next meeting will be on May 15th, and we'll have it at Wichita State, but there'll also be an online option for you as well. Okay. And then we did end up needing to reschedule Campo. It was supposed to be last Friday, but some things happened, so we moved it to August 21st. You still are all invited to that meeting if you'd like to attend. And I'm going to go back one slide because I think I accidentally did Chad's slide.
Thank you so much, Ashley, for giving an update on some of the tasks that we are working on. This is one of the studies that you have approved. The board has, this body has approved for economic development tasks. And today we have, Jeremy and his staff from WSU to talk about those measures of how the economic impacts on transportation and transportation impacts on economy. That was something that we are striving to illustrate. One of the deliverables of this project is the forecasting of demographic and socioeconomic data. That would be utilized by City of Wichita, Sedgwick County, and various jurisdictions as well. So we are looking forward to that deliverable as well. Today we have that presentation today. And with that, I also want to take this moment to mention that, as we keep an eye on improving the transportation system, we also keep an eye on how we can improve the safety of the transportation system. And then we all are working with KDOT in how the fatalities and serious injuries can be reduced. The study Ashley was mentioning about technical advisors on safety study is also striving towards the goal. So today we have Vanessa Spartan from KDOT as well. She'll be presenting on, you may remember a couple of years ago when the safety committee was meeting at Wampo area, they were discussing like how the Johnson County had fewer crashes than Sedgwick County. And then some of the members of the body wanted to see some investigation into it. Let's compare Sedgwick County and Johnson. So today we are lucky to have leadership of Vanessa, who had spent time and then compared the analysis, and the analytical report that Vanessa prepared is really very valuable. And then our TAC chair, Mayor of Hayesville, Mayor Russ Kessler, also had seen this in the TAC meeting. Today, that is also there today. So with that overview, let me give back to our chair, Madam Chair.
And did you want to mention about rescheduling Campo? Did you cover that one?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Thank you.
yep.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Awesome. Next, we have public comments. Does anyone in the room or online want to speak to public comments? You have 3 minutes to make any comments or suggestions for how to improve in our community. Seeing none, we'll go right into the action items. We have 3 of them today. The first one is the Transportation Improvement Program Amendment number 3, Reasonable Progress Policy. And it looks like Ashley and Nick.
All right, thank you. So the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, is our short-range plan of projects for federal fiscal year 23, 24, 25, and 26. And this links up with the long-range plan, the MTP. And so the TIP implements the vision of the MTP. Now, the full TIP was approved in August of last year, but we do quarterly amendments in order to keep it up to date. And we also wanted to make an adjustment to the reasonable progress policy. And so we have this as a separate action item because we felt it was important to have your all's input on that. So this was part of the overall TIP amendment schedule. So it was out for 15-day public comment period, March 11th to March 25th. And we did not receive any public comments. The TAC reviewed this at their March meeting, and now we're here today. The full TIP amendment can be found on the website, and the reasonable progress policy changes are on page 3 of the PDF. The current reasonable progress policy has 2 primary provisions on page 25 of the TIP policy document. The first one is requesting bi-monthly progress reports on projects that have the federal funding in them. And then the second bullet is the one that we're wanting to change, where it says if projects are not obligated by March 31st, the TPB has the option to pull that suballocated funding from the project, with the sponsor having an option to present the case to TPB. So TAC recommended some changes, and this was developed by TAC and staff and discussions with TPB and KDOT and member jurisdiction staff to instead of saying March 31st, say May 31st, and have that be more of a check-in rather than an actual like hard deadline. And then add the third bullet there, which would be completely new. If a project is anticipated to obligate in the last quarter of the federal fiscal year, which is July 1 to September 30th, the sponsor would have to provide additional information saying how they're going to be able to confirm the project will obligate within the federal fiscal year. And so here are the action options. And please let me know if any questions.
Any questions for Ashley? I do have a comment, and I know Gary Jansen, now our Director of Public Works, is joining us virtually. We had our City of Wichita pre-WAMPO meeting. Normally we meet on Friday, but we met on Monday because we thought of Campo. And on page 16 in the packet, it's the second page of this action item. It says project sponsors are required to provide project progress updates for any project. But then later in the second paragraph, it says will be given an opportunity to present their project status. And so we were just chatting, and Gary and I talked a bit more about it today, that it kind of seems like you're not really sure if you're supposed to provide something written or if you're supposed to do a presentation. And so we wondered if maybe cleaning up the language that you should be required to do a presentation to TAC and TPB and submit in writing. So that way everybody knows exactly what's supposed to happen. And Gary, if you're joining us, please feel free to say it better than I said it. And Ashley, you've been a part of the conversation too. So if you have comments, I'd welcome them, and love to hear what other people think, but we just thought it would clean it up just a little bit so everybody knows what their expectation is.
Yeah.
Are you with us, Gary?
Yeah, sorry, that sounded good to me. You said that well.
Mark this date down in history. I don't get that a lot. So does anybody have any thoughts on that, or any questions or suggestions or disagreements? I'm happy to have a conversation about it. We just thought it would be easier for everybody. And from the TAC perspective, do you have a thought or suggestion?
Well, that sounds good, because Gary was at our meeting also and made some suggestions.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it sounds great.
Okay. Seeing no other thoughts or suggestions, then I think we would go with the third bullet of approve the regional progress policy component of the TIP amendment number 3, with the changes that it will be submitted in writing and that there will be a presentation to TAC and TPB. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Anyone opposed? Fantastic. The item passes unanimously. Thank you. The next action item that we have is federal fiscal year 2023 through federal fiscal year 2026 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment number 3 projects. And again, the outstanding Ashley and Nick duo.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, so now we're here to talk about the projects that are being amended as part of this amendment. And again, this had the 15-day public comment period and did not receive any public comments, and was reviewed by TAC in March. The full TIP amendment can be found online at this link, and there are 6 projects in the amendment, 3 new ones and 3 that need to be modified. And there are 8 administrative adjustment projects that do not need approval from you all, but we wanted to make you aware that they are in there. So this map shows the projects. The red lines are the amended projects. The green ones are new, and then the blue ones are the administrative adjustments. And the green ones are all actually KDOT projects. And so we'll talk about that. So here's the list of projects that require formal action. The first one is the City of Garden Plain project. Needed to move the project from 23 to 24 and increase the costs because of inflation. And then we have a new KDOT project for bridges on I-235, and then 2 East Kellogg projects that are having phases removed and put into the new Kellogg project, which has a way larger budget for construction. And then a new project on US 54 at Ridge Road to have sign structures put in. So this table just shows the local, state, and federal funding changes. The City of Garden Plain project just had local funding changes. And then KDOT has the KDOT Bridge one on I-235 had state and federal funds. Then the 2 US 54 projects had funding removed and put in the third US 54 project. And then we have the new sign structures project, and the City of Hayesville project needed more local funding added. So this table shows the administrative adjustment that does not require formal action. This just included a partial pushback of an AC conversion to ensure that we were still balanced in the federal fiscal year 23. And this project meets all of our requirements, including our public participation plan, had the public period, and it's consistent with our MTP. It is fiscally constrained and it adds $80.6 million to the TIP. So here are the action options. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Ashley or Nick? If not, then I would move to approve the additional modification components of federal fiscal year 2023 through 2026 TIP amendment number 3 as presented. Is there a second? Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Anyone opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Our last action item is 2023 Transit Asset Management, and that's with Alicia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Alicia Hunter, Senior Transportation Planner. So I'm presenting on the TAM targets. At the last TPB meeting, we presented the recommended performance targets for the performance measures 1, 2, and 3. So today we're here presenting on the recommended transit asset management targets, also known as TAM targets. So it give a little background. In 2012, MAP 21 mandated FTA to develop a rule establishing a strategic and systematic process for operating, maintaining, and improving public capital assets effective through their entire life cycle. And so this was solidified through the TAM final rule, which became effective on October 1st, 2016. There are 3 federal performance measures that apply to the transit agencies operating in the WAMPO region, and that includes rolling stock, which applies to revenue vehicles. And then we have equipment, which applies to non-revenue service vehicles. And last is facilities. So now let's briefly go over the WAMPO target adoption process and how those specific TAM targets. So MPOs have 2 options for setting performance measure targets. They can either support and adopt the statewide targets established by the DOTs, or they can support the statewide targets by establishing their own targets. Regardless of which option MPOs choose, they have no later than 180 days after the state DOTs set their targets and the transit agencies set their targets and share those with the MPOs. And so with coordination with KDOT and Wichita Transit, WAMPO has chosen to support and accept their established TAM targets for the WAMPO region. And let's look at 2 sets of TAM targets that apply to certain areas within the WAMPO region. So here are KDOT's 2023 TAM targets. These targets apply to the WAMPO region, excluding Wichita Transit's and the City of Derby's service area. Here are Wichita Transit's 2023 TAM targets, and these targets apply to Wichita Transit and the City of Derby's service areas within the WAMPO region. Those are the TAM targets that WAMPO proposes to adopt for the WAMPO region. And after the final adoption process, WAMPO will reference and support these targets throughout our transportation planning process. And WAMPO recommends to TPB to approve the 2023 TAM targets for the WAMPO region. And so with that, are there any questions before we get to a vote?
Any questions for Alicia? Thank you very much for a great presentation. I appreciate it. Seeing no questions or comments, I would move to approve the 2023 TAM targets for WAMPO region as presented. Is there a second? Thank you very much. All those in favor, please say aye. Anyone dreadfully opposed to this? All right, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We will now go to discussion and updates. And next on the agenda is Michael with Forvis for our 2022 audit report draft. And both of the documents are on the WAMPO website if you want the opportunity to review them, but I know he's going to give us a great overview. So welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Chairwoman. Yes, my name is Michael Gerber. I'm a partner with Forvis. We're an accounting firm here in town, formerly known as BKD. Long story, but we merged with another firm called DHG. Rather than jumble all the letters together, we just came up with a new name. But you're basically dealing with the same team that we've had here for the past couple of years. Myself, also Julian Rios was our in charge, so he was out here for a week. So a similar team that you've had from last year, at least some continuity there. I certainly want to thank your finance team for doing such a great job getting us what we need to do our audit and do our work. Chad, Kim, Ashley, Patty, appreciate the hospitality while we were hanging out with you for a week, but they did a great job getting us what we need. So today what we have, again, Becky mentioned that you've got some documents in front of you. I'm not going to go through these page by page, but it is the financial statements and also the management letter that we issue as a result of our audits. These are in draft form, so if you have any questions or see any things that needs to be changed, we can certainly handle that at this point in time. We want to give this group a chance to look at it, give their blessing. We'll finalize it. I'll be back at the meeting in May. Should anybody have any questions, I can answer them at that time as well, if you don't think of them at this point in time. So as far as the statements, really two big changes here for the current year. Increased funding in your consolidated planning grants. So you're going to see an increase in revenue, expenses, and assets as a result of that. Also, the TIP funding increased as well. So just overall increases in funding there. However, keep in mind that is federal funding, and I'm sure everybody in this group is probably well aware if you have a certain amount of federal funding that requires compliance audits. You didn't require that last year, but 2 years ago you had one. And for those of you who were here at that point in time, you probably remember some findings and some significant deficiencies as a result of that audit 2 years ago. I'm going to go over the results here today, here in a little bit, but spoiler alert, I think you're going to be pretty happy with the results of this particular compliance audit. The other big change here for the current year is there's a new audit standard called GASB 87. It has to do with leases. The good news is, although we had to check out your financial statements to see if it impacted anything, the good news is it really did not. So we didn't have to make any adjustments or put any new leases on your books for this year. But please be aware, you are now leasing this building from the county. So there will be a lease to put on your books here for the next year here in the future. So just want to make you aware of that moving forward for something new there. As far as the statements go, if you're really eagle-eyed and you've already looked at these, you'll notice there's a few pages missing. I think Chad did a good job in his email mentioning why. Since these are in draft form, we don't include our opinion in these, but we do intend to issue a clean and unmodified opinion. That's the opinion that you want as a result of your audit. So certainly good news there. On page 4, you get into, if you haven't really read these before, page 4 is probably a good place to start. It's the management discussion and analysis. It kind of gives a good overview of what the changes were, which I kind of already alluded to those. That's the the new grant that you had for the current year. The increase in funding from that is really the big change year over year on these financial statements. Following the MD&A is the statements themselves, the notes. Again, I don't have a whole lot of changes to report there, so I'm not really going to spend any time into the details on those reports. But towards the end of the statements is where you're going to see that compliance audits for your federal funding. And again, it's fairly short, about as short as you can get, because we had no findings as a result of our audit. So what that tells me is, 2 years ago, when you had some of those findings, management did kind of take the initiative to get those corrected because they did not repeat here for this year. So certainly good news there. The last document there, the separate one, is the management letter. These are some required communications with management. Again, there's really no findings to discuss in there. We didn't have any adjustments as a result of our audits. We did just have a few what we call small things that we track. If we get enough of these small adjustments and they get big enough, we would propose making an adjustment. But in this case, they were not big enough, so we just passed on them. So no concerns there either. So that covers what I had, the main topics of my presentation. If there are any questions, I'll pause and open that up. But again, I'll also be out here in May if you don't, so you don't have to rush through anything at this point in time.
Any questions for Michael? I'm sure you've all thoroughly enjoyed the audit, right? And your anticipation until May when we have the final draft. But any comments, questions, suggestions? Troy's itching for something.
I'm just saying, no findings. That is exceptional. Way to
Yes,
go,
I
everybody.
think we should give ourselves a round of
Yeah,
applause.
team effort.
Thank you, team effort. Excellent. Anything else besides kudos? All right, thank you very much, Mike. Oh, do you have something, Jen?
I just want to thank Michael and his team because they did a hard work and they put a lot of files from us, and staff was scrambling to get many documents. So good work, and Michael is so committed on the timeline and very responsive in every way. And also want to take the moment to thank our Commissioner Dan Vijak and Commissioner David Dennis and our chair as well for constantly keeping an eye on fiscal responsibility is important. And of course, our chair constantly reminds ethical responsibility is also important. So we have a great executive committee and the board that staff is very proud to serve. And we hope to continue this way. And everyone I talk to is just inspiring. And one example is when I talk to Troy, he's like, excellence is normal. Exception is what we strive for. That's how he's always is. So it's all inspiring to, and then that's all. And thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Chad. Great comments. Appreciate it. Thank you, Michael. And we'll see you in a few months.
Thank you.
I guess next month. Yeah. Next on the agenda is issue briefs, the impact of physical activity, distracted driving, and motor vehicle fatalities in Sedgwick County. And we have Margaret from the Sedgwick County Health Department with 3 issue briefs that they've developed. So welcome, Margaret. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you. So I'm Margaret Sharma. I'm a data analyst at the Sedgwick County Health Department. And so one of the things we looked at is physical activity, the impact of physical activity on other health conditions. And so what we saw is that census tracts that have low physical activity have low or high health risks. So this is from the BRFIS, and the high percentage in the first column is for adults who do not get any outside or leisure physical activity time. And as those red are higher, the diabetes, heart disease, stroke, mental health, depression are all also in that higher, darker shades of red. And then when we look at census tracts that have low percentages of no physical activity, or they get a lot of physical activity, they have lower rates of diabetes, heart disease, stroke, mental health, and depression. So these are all research backed that if you have more physical activity, it impacts the risk of diabetes, heart disease, stroke. There is research that says that there is a connection between physical activity and certain types of cancer. On the BRFIS, it's all types of cancer. So we don't see that link on this table, but that's because this looks at all, we think it's because it looks at all cancer. When we look at the Sedgwick County, the darker shades of purple are those darker shades or those higher levels of physical inactivity. And when we zoom in on those census tracts, these are the census tracts that were in that high risk table, that first table with a lot of red values. So we see a lot of the census tracts are in the metropolitan area and have been the focus of WAMPO before. The next thing we looked at was distracted driving and the impact on pedestrians and cyclists. And this is using national traffic data that's available nationally. So nationally, I wanted to draw your attention to 16.7% of pedestrians were killed due to, or 16% of driving fatalities involved a pedestrian, and 2.4% of driving fatalities involved a bicyclist nationally. For Sedgwick County, we have 85 fatalities between 2010 and 2020 were due to distracted driving. And then on the right table, you'll see that those 85 are broken down to 3 of those were bicyclists and 16 of the 85 were pedestrians. So when we think of that, 18.8% were from distracted driving pedestrian deaths and 3.5% were pedocyclist distracted driving. Looking at all fatalities, that number was 542. And then we put that over onto the left table and we can see that of 542, there were 11 pedocyclists and 68 pedestrian. So that 12.5% and 2% going back to the national was 16.7 and 2.4. So we're a little bit better than national. The percentage of total pedestrian fatalities caused by distracted driving, we can compare the US, Kansas, and Sedgwick County and see that in 2014 and 2016, especially there were some higher numbers of fatalities for pedestrians and bicyclists, especially in Sedgwick County. The number of pedestrians is the graph on the right. And that one you can see that there's usually about 1 or 2 pedestrian fatalities. So it's not a lot of fatalities, but we were higher than percentage wise, we were higher than the national average in 2014 and then 2016, 2017. For bicyclists, the numbers are a lot lower. They're around 2%. So this y-axis is a bit bigger so that we can see those differences. And the differences in 2014 and 2016, we again saw those higher percentage of fatalities. But one thing to really celebrate, I think, is looking at the right table, the number of pedal cyclists in Sedgwick County and the number of fatalities. For pedestrians, we had just 1 in 2020, whereas Kansas had 10, and pedocyclists, we had 1 fatality when there were 4. So we've been a little bit lower than national at times. Then looking at injuries, this data set uses ER visits. So this was a data analysis that we did based on ER visits and ICD-10 codes. And when we looked at pedestrian injuries, we did see that in 2019, there was a bit of a spike and then it went down. We kind of thought it would go up during the pandemic, but it's kind of gone down a little bit, which is really good to see. And then these are kind of gives you a trend idea. They don't give you exact numbers because it's only ER. So if you got hit and then you walked away and you were okay, but later you decided to go to your doctor, that doesn't get involved in this data set. But what I like about this data set is we can look at those ICD-10 codes by color on the right, and most of them were orange, which is that V03, and that's a pedestrian injured in a collision with a car or pickup. So that's like a direct injury. And the next set was the V9, which is pedestrian injured in other unspecified transport accident. And those can include if someone gets their hand stuck in the door of a car. It just depends on how the ER codes. Some ERs will specify what happened and we can remove those from this data set, and others will just use the ICD-10 codes. So that's kind of the trends we saw for pedestrians. And then for bicyclists, we also saw that 2019 they were higher and then it went down a little bit during the pandemic. And for those ICD-10 codes for bicyclists, the highest color was that dark green, which is the V18, and that is pedal cyclists injured in a non-collision transport accident, or no, it's V18. What is it? Yeah, V18. And those can be if someone swerves.
Oh, yeah. No.
So that V18 and V19, a lot of bicycle accident or injuries that we saw were someone swerving to avoid being hit, and then that V19 V19 being, so those V18 and V19 can be non-collision where they swerve to avoid it, or it was unspecified how that happened, but we don't see a lot of bicyclists being directly hit by a car. So I can go back to this was the pedestrian one, where it's that dark green is that V3, that they were injured directly by a vehicle. So when we convert those into a rate per 100,000 for Sedgwick County residents, we can see that there are definitely more bike related injuries, even though there were more pedestrian related deaths. So it kind of goes with the risk. You're on the road, you're more likely to be injured, but for pedestrians, they're not usually on the road. So if they are hit, it's usually more fatal. So those are kind of what we were seeing in Sedgwick County. Any questions?
Any questions? I have 2, if that's okay, Margaret. So I'm going to make sure that I read these issue briefs more thoroughly. I just glanced at them, but what is the definition of distracted driving?
So distracted driving, we tend to think about being cell phone use, but only 1% of accidents are actually, or fatalities were due to cell phone use. So distracted driving can be anything. And it's a lot of times when the police comes and says, what was the cause of this accident? And they would say, oh, I was distracted. So you might be looking at the radio, talking to someone behind you in the back seat, or just not paying attention. So it's whenever the driver gave the reason for their accident as being distracted driving, that they were distracted.
Okay, so it's whatever the driver says, so it's self-report. So there's,
Yes.
some authenticity issues sometimes with that. Okay, and then my second question is, these look really great and I'm a data junkie, so I'm always excited about this. And Bike Ped is, where I grew up in my career. What are we going to do with these issue briefs? We have all this great data and information, and I'm sure Bike Walk Wichita will be salivating over how they can, share their messages. But what is the plan for how they'll be distributed and to get the information out?
So I think this was our first step, was just to share the information and share the trends that we're seeing in Sedgwick County. But I don't know if there are any plans for WAMPO to use this information, or if there was further collaboration for Sedgwick County Health Department.
And I'd be happy to chat with you. I know we could put them in like the Health and Wellness Coalition of Wichita newsletters. The city of Wichita may be able to do something with them. We could work with our folks in Public Works, maybe even for some safety messages or something. So let's maybe connect. And if anybody else has any ideas for WAMPO staff or for Margaret, I'm sure they'd be open. It's always important for me that when we get good information like this and work's been put into this, a lot of staff time, that something comes from it, right? That we use the data the best that we can to help improve safety in our community. Alan, you have any thoughts or suggestions? I can see the wheels turning over there. Pun intended.
Thank you. This information was presented to the Safety and Health Committee earlier. They have not met since that presentation. The Active Transportation Committee is on hold right now for other reasons, but so they have not yet been presented. But yes, both of those committees will be discussing it and understanding the significance, and hopefully incorporate that into their reports at the end of their role.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from Margaret? All right, thank you very much. Thanks for all your hard work and for presenting today. Great job. Next, we have Household Government Vitality and Business Dynamic Indices. We have Jonathan Norris, who I just had the pleasure of meeting in the elevator on the way up, and a good friend, Jeremy Hill. So we'll look forward to hearing the information.
Hello, everyone. I'm actually not Jonathan Norris. I'm Craig Compton with the Center for Economic Development and Business Research. Jonathan Norris is online joining us. Let me see if we can. Yeah, I'll let you drive.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. So yes, today we're going to be talking about the regional indicators that we have produced as the household index, which we call our Healthy, Wealthy, Wise Index, our Business Dynamism Index, and our Government Vitality Index. And then we're going to take a look at some examples of how some of this data gets used to generate more detailed reports. So go ahead and advance the slide. So first, the Healthy, Wealthy, Wise Index is a measure of the conditions within this region and within the cities within the region from the perspective of households. You have these three dimensions that each look at specific components of it, with the health dimension assessing risk within your labor market, the wealth dimension assessing economic opportunity, and the wise dimension assessing the potential for productivity and skill prevalence within your workforce by looking at the educational attainment of that workforce. Go ahead and advance the slide. So at the state level, you have a lot of, it's a generally optimistic look for this region, except for in the core of Sedgwick County, which is driven by high poverty rates that are concentrated into the city center. You can see that on this next slide. If you look at the breakdown of ranks for communities across the region, what we want to highlight here is that Wichita ranks 20th out of the 22 communities within the WAMPO region. And that you can see that within that central four columns, it ranks very low in terms of its Gini coefficient, which is wealth disparity, household income, and poverty. The highest ranking community in this region, one of the larger communities, is Andover. Go ahead and advance to the next slide. The next index that we have is business dynamism, which measures the state of the economy and the amount of movement that you have from the perspective of firms. The two dimensions here being the diversification of businesses as measured by employment, establishment, and wages, and then the 5-year growth in each of those. Go ahead and move on to the next slide. So in 2023, the WAMPO region and Sedgwick County and Butler County in particular have very high ranks for the on the state level. So go ahead and advance the slide, and you can see that in the WAMPO region, Andover again ranks #1, but Wichita ranks very, very highly in this as well, 5th. So even in your city center, the largest concentration of the population in this area, you have a very dynamic environment for businesses. Go ahead and advance to the next slide. So from the perspective of government, that's the third index that gets produced here. We have the 3 dimensions of your market growth, your core economic drivers, and your fiscal growth. So go ahead and move on. This is where there are some lower ranks compared to the state. You have a lower ranking in Sedgwick County there at 77th. And if you move on to the next slide, Wichita itself is highlighted at rank 8th, but again, Andover being ranked #1. You have the lowest ranking community is a smaller one in this region, Clearwater. But so these are these high level indexes that measure the conditions within the economy. And one of the key features that we wanted to produce within this report is creating these data dashboards that let users explore these to really target in on their needs. All 3 of those dashboards are now up on WAMPO's website. I don't think the link got attached to the agenda packet, but you can go and explore the data in depth at your own pace. I know this is very quick online right now on WAMPO's website under the Economic Development Project. So some examples of how we can use some of this data to generate more detailed looks at communities, right, is through our report on labor mobility. Go ahead and move on. So mobility is an important consideration when building out a transportation demand model and looking at how your transportation system is affected by economic variables, right? So we can look at this example report of mobility, the mobility of the labor force. Split into people and firms. So improvements in each of those variables in the center column create benefits in increased wages, increased effective wages rather to your residents, which increases engagement in local markets. And then to firms, you have easing the burden of tight labor markets and lowered operational costs, which causes improvements in your supply chain. Go ahead and move on. Within this report, you look at variables such as demographic considerations. Here's an example of age and how we would assess that and its ability to impact the way the transportation system is going to work. So age, you have youths which are more cost sensitive and have a preference for things like bike paths and walkability, and then a high preference for systems of transportation that allow them to access education within the region. It's going to be different for different age cohorts. For example, elders are very apt to use paratransit systems, which is more difficult to achieve in suburban settings. Go ahead and move on. So that was just one example. There's other demographics that we're considering in these reports. The other actual elements of labor mobility, we're looking at the residents of your workforce. So where are people living within this region? What is the duration of commutes? How are people actually getting to work? Measured by different forms of public transportation. Are they walking? Are they driving personal vehicles or carpooling? And then actually what time of day those commutes are occurring. These are all going to be highly impactful on how your transportation system gets utilized and the strain that is put on it. So developing a good transportation demand model is really going to need to take some of these into account. So go ahead and move on, and I will turn it over to my compatriot, Craig.
So I conducted our study on the housing report and a few reasons why that relates to transportation. Housing specifically For the firms, it increases their access to labor, and it has the potential to increase labor compatibility so that people are more able to reach the jobs that they are best suited for. And for individuals or households, it does enable, or good transportation systems enable people to live closer to those desired jobs, and it increases their mobility across the region. A few of the tools that we use to look at that are housing affordability, and this kind of informs the question, how much available cash do households have to spend on transportation? Another aspect or dimension that we look at is income, and income changes over time and those trends. So this answers the question, how might communities utilize transportation? Low-income communities might have a higher demand for public transportation, while high-income communities might have different demands for transportation infrastructure and maintenance. And then this informs a story of the alignment of supply and demand. And so this tells you what communities are developing dwellings, and then where people are being induced to move. And so I pointed out last meeting, Mays doubled its housing supply over the past 5 years, but maintained 100% occupancy. And so all of the dwellings that they built, they filled. So that just kind of informs that story of where people are being induced to move. And so that's kind of the summation of our presentation. We will be available for questions or to answer any of the other details that you might have. So we'll take questions now if you have them.
Any questions for Craig or Jonathan or Jeremy, of course?
No.
Again, yes, please, Jen.
Madam Chair, thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to thank Jeremy and his staff that WAMPO staff took a new initiative on this long-range transportation plan, because long-range transportation plan, when it is associated with the impacts and the quantifying economy is difficult. And Jonathan, Craig, and Jeremy had tons of data. It's just so creative, and WAMPO staff is so fortunate to have such resource in our own Wichita area and Wichita State University. So we are pleased to work with the staff. That's all, Madam Chair. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I agree. I think we all strive as policymakers and decision makers in our communities to make data-driven decisions, right? And this is just kind of one more tool in our tool belt, some new information. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a great day. Thank you. All right, next agenda item is the 2021 Annual Average Daily Traffic Report, and it looks like Alicia's back.
I am. Hi. Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. So ADDT is annual average daily traffic, and it's a useful and basic measurement that indicates how busy a road is on an average day during a given year. And so using KDOT traffic count data, WAMPO staff have developed a 2021 ADDT report for 7 major corridors within the WAMPO region. And that includes I-35, I-135, I-235, US 54, K-15, K-96, and K-254. So this 2021 ADDT report briefly covers and illustrates KDOT's data collection and collection site types, the 7 major corridors, with each corridor divided into segments that are delineated by intersecting roadways. And then each corridor has its own subsection where traffic volumes are illustrated in a map, chart, or set of charts, and a table. And the ADDT maps will illustrate the magnitude of traffic volume on each segment along a specified corridor by using graduated symbols. And then the charts will show the difference between 2020 and 2021 ADDT numbers. And then the tables will list the segments of the corridors and then their associated ADDT numbers for 2020 and 2021. And then all the traffic volume numbers are bidirectional or two-way counts. So in addition to reporting on each corridor individually, this report also includes a corridor comparison. And so here is a map showing the corridor comparison of all the 7 major corridors that we looked at. And it illustrates which corridors are most heavily traveled, and it was created by defining and applying the same traffic volume ranges for each corridor, which revealed that US 54 is the most traveled roadway within the Wampo region. Also included in this report is a section illustrating the highest AADT segments. And I'd like to take a second to pass this to Chad for any additional comments and elaborations on this data.
Thank you, Alicia. Members and I just want to add what Alicia already mentioned, that this is to present how our transportation system is serving the public. For example, what are the major corridors? What are the magnitude? For instance, Kellogg has a high ADT of 121,000 riders every day. That type of thing. Just want to give, we want to provide a high level of quantifying how the system is operating. And this will also help to compare from one region to the other. For example, if we go to Salina, if you see a high traffic area there, like let's say 75,000 or so, that will help us. Staff strives to quantify the usual that we all serve in transportation system and all. So also this shows how one corridor is higher than the other corridor in serving more riders and so on. For example, K15 corridor, about 31,000 traffic on K15 corridor every day. And then I-135 is the second, 93,000 traffic. And this will also give a magnitude of how many lanes should it be, why there are so many lanes in each of these highly traveled. So just a high level summary for you, nothing details. Thank you, Alicia, continue.
Yeah, thank you, Chad.
Thank you for the comment. Any other questions or thoughts about this? Yes, Councilmember Fry.
Thank you. I've not drilled into the attachment yet, but does it show the previous numbers to compare it so we can track how it's changed over time?
Thank you, Councilmember. That's a great idea. We will do that. We will see the trends that how the traffic increased in the recent past. We will work on that and present at the next opportunities.
Yes, we do have that data, and the report has 2020 and 2021, but we do have data that shows back farther to show a longer history trend.
So I can see that by clicking on the link and drilling into it myself.
You could see 2020 and 2021 in the report. Yeah, now. Mhm.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So these are fairly short segments of each of these roadways. How does that compare to the overall roadway? For instance, US 54 is South Washington to Interstate 135. That's probably less than a mile of that roadway, but that roadway goes all the way through the metropolitan area.
And so your question is, sorry.
So how do we use that data to say, okay, US 54 is high used? I mean, it's pretty obvious it's high use, but that it's 121,000 represents the entire roadway. It just, because it looks like it's a pretty short segment, and that is a heavily traveled segment of that roadway.
That's a good question, Mayor. This table shows the highest segment, and you're absolutely right. There are other segments that are lesser volume than this on this corridor. That is true. Just for the sake of high level summary of the system, only high traffic on each corridor were presented in this summary.
In the full report, you can see all the segments of the entire corridor. So from the very beginning to the very end, you can see the ADT for each segment along the way. So this one, like Chad said, is just showing the busiest segment for each corridor. So we're just kind of highlighting that to just show where the biggest impact is within each area.
Tom, yes.
I was going to say, do you have any idea how much the construction and stuff skewing some of this numbers? Because there's a lot of people that aren't going through some of them intersections anymore because of the construction.
I do not.
We're looking at numbers and saying this is the actual count or average count last year, and there's several of those were high construction areas and people were not using them. So they were diverted to other areas. And I didn't know if you had any kind of a impact on that or count.
I don't have that taken into account in the report. I do not. That's something we can look into.
And just to kind of build upon that, my first thought was when you said you have 2020 data, I would imagine that that would be pretty skewed as well, because for a good portion of 2020, many of us weren't traveling around the community very much because of the pandemic. So 2020 might be the outlier anyway, and then we'll have 21 and 22 and all the other years with the construction. So that's a great point. Thank you, Tom. Yeah. Any other brilliant nuggets such as that or questions? All right. Thank you, Alicia. We appreciate your presentation and all your hard work. Next, we have the Sedgwick County versus Johnson County crashes, and that's with Vanessa with KDOT.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm online because I had to present in Manhattan today to the Kansas Engineering Conference. So I want to thank you all for having us here today. I'm presenting on behalf of my staff at KDOT. I am the Bureau Chief of Transportation Safety at KDOT, and we process the crash reports for the state. We conduct analysis, and then we guide programming in behavioral safety and in the safety set-aside programs for engineering investments. So lots of different things that we do. If you want to go ahead and switch to the next slide, I'll tell everybody kind of where we started from. So earlier in the meeting, Chad mentioned how there was a question or request asked of us of, why is Johnson County have such different statistics than Sedgwick County when it comes to fatal and serious injury crashes? And so this slide kind of, helps to summarize that. So despite Johnson County having about 78,000 more people, Sedgwick County has about 2 to 3 times more fatal crashes. And I'll explain why we say 2 to 3, because it kind of depends on how you run that analysis. And then, as I mentioned, WAMPO staff asked kind of why that was occurring. So we conducted an analysis that looked just at fatal and serious injury crashes for 2017 to 2021 and provide that comparison. So this presentation is just a comparison between the 2 counties. It's very different in the sense of your comprehensive safety action plan and the analysis that they did, where they're just looking at the data objectively. We're doing kind of a comparison point. Before we switch to the next slide, I just want to point to this map, and we just isolated crashes reported as Johnson County or Sedgwick County. And there's 2 different things to notice. So while this map doesn't have a legend, I can tell you that the red dots indicate fatal crashes and the yellow dots indicate serious injury. So when you look at Sedgwick County versus Johnson County, you can see there's more red in Sedgwick County than in Johnson County. And you also see that the crashes are a little bit more dispersed in Sedgwick County, and that's going to show up in the analysis. If you would go to the next slide. So in terms of the framework for us conducting the analysis, we use what's called a safe system approach when we're trying to look at how to comprehensively analyze crashes, but we really focus on 2 elements. So if you click the next button, we looked at the safer roads elements and the safer people elements of the safe system approach. If you go to the next slide. Okay, so as I mentioned, Sedgwick County has about 2 to 3 times more fatal and serious injury crashes than Johnson County. So as I mentioned, we took 5 years of data, 2017 to 2021. And anytime you see a chart or graph in this presentation, know that Sedgwick County is reflected in the orange color and Johnson County is reflected in the blue. And when you add up all of those numbers over the 5 years, you see in Sedgwick County, there was 291 fatal crashes, resulting in, well, I'll get into the fatalities later, but 291 fatal crashes in Sedgwick County, 120 fatal crashes in Johnson County. And then for serious injury crashes, there was 930 versus 710. Sometimes people ask what serious injury means. When it comes to crash severity, there's a 5-point scale. And serious injury is, they didn't lose their life, but they had a life-altering injury. So you think of loss of limb, head trauma, incapacitating injury is what a serious injury is. You go to the next slide, please. Okay, so a quick side-by-side comparison. So as I mentioned, the difference in fatal crashes, 291 versus 120. That resulted in fatalities, so persons actually involved, so not just a singular crash, but all of the people involved. 315 fatalities in Sedgwick County, 129 in Johnson County. And then we tried to normalize that, so figure out a rate. So we did it two different ways. We looked at population. So if you take your fatal crashes, divide by 100,000 people, you have 11.34 fatal crash rate for Sedgwick County versus 4.03 for Johnson County. And then if you divide it by million daily vehicle miles traveled, it's 4.81 versus 1.63. That's also shown in your serious injury numbers. So the crash rate for serious injury is 15.36 versus 9.63. And you know, a lot of times this, you know, we try and take a moment to think about the people and the loss of lives and the impact that this has on communities, but it also has an economic consequence. So FHWA provides us guidance on how to do comprehensive crash costs, and our latest comprehensive crash costs indicate that a fatal crash costs us over $12.8 million. And that includes the goods and services used for crash response, property damage, medical costs, and the general health decline of crash victims. So 12.8 million for fatal crashes, about 700,000 for serious injury crashes. So when you add up those two severity levels and you compare Sedgwick County versus Johnson County, you see a $4.4 billion comprehensive crash costs for Sedgwick County versus a $2 billion crash cost for Johnson County. If you go to the next slide. So we provided a little bit more context comparison. So we looked at urban crashes versus rural crashes. And at the top, we provided a ratio so you could see really where the differences occur. So you have about 2 times more urban crashes than Johnson County. You have 4 times more rural crashes than Johnson County, even though it's not your highest area, because you certainly have more urban area than you have rural area in Sedgwick County. Your local crashes occurring on the local network, not on the state system, is about a 3-to-1 ratio. So 3 times more crashes on the local network in Sedgwick County than in Johnson County. If you go to the next slide, please. Then we took it a couple different ways. We looked at centerline lane miles. And the way to read this chart, if you see kind of the plus numbers and the minus numbers at the top, that would indicate if you have more or less than Johnson County. So you have about 147 more state network miles. You have 2,000 more local network miles. You have about 1,000 less ADT in the urban network and about 1,100 less ADT in the rural network. And then in terms of, we looked at, you know, I talked about local network before, we looked at local functional class and to see, you know, if we could see a divide there between urban and rural. And we're seeing you have less average daily traffic, you have more total centerline lane mileage, and but you have less local urban mileage in terms of exposure. So you go to the next slide. And then we looked at disadvantaged communities categories. And so you can use, USDOT has this Equitable Transportation Community Explorer. And when you look at the disadvantaged categories, there's climate and disaster risk burden, there's environmental burden, health vulnerability, social vulnerability, and transportation insecurity. And comparing the two counties, about 35.1% of your census tracts in Sedgwick County are in the disadvantaged community category versus 2.76 in Johnson County. More specifically, we looked at our fatal crashes. We get some additional analysis out of our fatal crashes, understanding kind of other characteristics that are in the crashes. So we looked at our 2019 reporting. That's the most recent closeout reporting we have from our federal reporting process. But we had 38 fatalities in Kansas that were occupants of Hispanic ethnicity, and 12 of those 38 were in Sedgwick County. So that tells us, you know, that's a population group to certainly get messaging out to in terms of safe road user behaviors. You go to the next slide. Okay, and then we looked at factors influencing crashes. So the while lane departure is certainly your highest fatal crash and fatal and serious injury crash type, you actually see the biggest difference in run off the road crashes between Sedgwick and Johnson County. If you could click the next button too. And then the other one, from a behavioral standpoint, you see a large difference between belt use in Sedgwick versus Johnson County in these crashes. I would also point out where you have like anywhere higher than a 2% difference is worth noting. So you have a higher ped cyclist rate, you have more speeding, and as I mentioned, more lane departure. So if you go to the next slide. Okay, so as I said, oh, there we go. Yep. So this is just a quick recap. Again, we just kept it pretty high level, knowing that you guys were doing your comprehensive safety action plan and you would do further investigation. But the big takeaway is that the comprehensive crash cost for fatal and serious injuries in Sedgwick County is $4.4 billion. What we're seeing in the data is that you should take a comprehensive approach. You should take a 4E approach to safety. So looking at education, enforcement, engineering, and emergency response. And this analysis does provide some initial clues, but we would certainly encourage further exploration by various types of safety partners. You go to the next slide, I give you a couple of those clues that we're seeing in the data. So when crashes and your traffic patterns are widely dispersed, so you see lower volumes, but more lane mileage, education countermeasures and doing systemic engineering improvements, they're likely to be more effective than spot engineering improvements. So like the way that I think of it is don't just chase the dots, but understand the patterns and try and resolve the patterns. So that's one thing that we would say in terms of what we're seeing in your distribution. And then we would say, you know, it's worthwhile to explore why there's more local urban crashes despite less local urban mileage. So that's an area to kind of go further into. That could give you some clues as to spot locations, or it could help you to figure out kind of systemic priorities. And then I would say explore the conditions and factors that are leading to run off the road crashes, both in urban and rural contexts. We see it in both areas in Sedgwick County. It's worth looking into. And then we say, you know, from an education enforcement standpoint, how to influence, you know, road safety culture and social norming. There's two risky driving behaviors that stand out. So not wearing seat belts and speeding would be some key messaging points to hit at. And then in terms of exploring engineering investments and education campaigns, look at kind of those disadvantaged communities and vulnerable road users. Both of those are areas that you could probably tackle and accomplish some pretty high improvements in terms of your performance targets for safety. So I think that's the last slide. I have my information up there if you ever want to write it down, but I'm open for any questions too.
Any questions for Vanessa? Okay, Troy, please.
One of the questions I would have would be if there was any look at transportation, like the busing system or the metropolitan transit that we have versus what they have there.
We didn't go that far to look into, like, you know, if there's better transportation choices between the two regions. That certainly is something that could be expanded further. I saw, you know, that presentation that was just given before about kind of mode choices might be a good way to do a comparison between the two counties.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner, it's hard for me not to say Chairman, Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. Well, I appreciate the information. It's kind of sobering in a lot of ways, but a lot of the things that I see, at least here in Sedgwick County, and I'm looking at my district, it's a very rural district. It's human error, and I don't know how to correct for human error. For example, at 21st Street, going out west and 167th Street, that is probably the most open intersection you'll ever see. You can see miles every single direction. And yet I can count on probably an accident there every month, and every third or fourth is a fatal accident. And every single one of them is because they, for some reason, can't see a 48-inch stop sign with a 6-inch yellow beacon above it with 3 or 4 stop ahead signs going up to it, big markers on all of the posts, cross traffic doesn't stop. All of that is out there. Oh, so how do we solve? And I'm very frustrated with it because we just had another accident this past week. How do we solve that?
You know, and it's not an easy answer. So, you know, I talked about that safe system approach before, and they talk about how redundancy is crucial. So it's not just the engineering improvements that are important, it's also that road safety culture. And so, you know, how do you get people to recognize when they are at higher risk just by where they're traveling? Understand, you know, follow the rules of the road, drive the right speed, don't drive distracted. Candidly, one of our biggest challenges in our state and Kansas, 45% of our fatal crashes are single vehicle crashes. It's not people hitting people all the time, right? So that's where, you know, the presentation earlier about inattention is really critical, but also speed is really critical. And you're right, there's not always an engineering solution to fix the behaviors. But you try and whittle your way through social norming and getting people to, you know, reduce their risky behaviors that they're taking.
Thank you, Vanessa. I do have a question. It was a couple slides back. It was the one that had the 4 E's: education, enforcement, engineering, and emergency response. If you could, and we don't have to go back, but you quoted from 2017. There you go. Thank you. To 2021, fatal and serious injury crashes cost Sedgwick County $4.4 billion. That's a huge number. And I was asking my colleague, and he said, ask the group, what does that entail? Is that, you know, the cost of my vehicle, medical expenses, cost to municipalities? What does 4.4 billion, what is that number? Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. We get that question a lot. So for a fatal crash is 12.8 million, sorry, yes, 12.8 million per fatal crash. And then for a serious injury crash, it's 700,000 roughly. And so what it includes is, and I'm just going to read it from you. So we get it from FHWA, and then we adjust for the Kansas situation in terms of our statistics and everything. So comprehensive economic cost of each crash. So it's also called the human capital cost. So it's the monetary impact of crashes, including goods and services related to the crash response, property damage, and medical costs. It's the economic costs of the direct and indirect costs to individuals and societies from a decline in the health of the crash victims. So I think the way to think of it is, you know, it's not just that point in time that crash occurs and the costs associated with it. It's that person, if they're seriously injured and they're disabled, their ability to earn economically gets impacted for some amount of time, right? So it's also that loss of economic generation by somebody becoming like permanently disabled, or in the situation of a fatal crash, you know, that's another population loss.
Fascinating. Thank you. Is there any way you could send that language to WAMPO staff at all, or?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
I actually have I have Kansas's memo that I can provide to the staff that would give you actually the breakdown of all the injury levels too, and the costs.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Any other questions?
Well,
Yes.
more of an observation, maybe comment. You know, there are two things that Vanessa emphasized. There was seatbelt usage and speed. And I know, you know, the police are great about putting their click it or ticket, but that doesn't really tell you any statistic, any number. What happens there. Yeah, and I was just wondering if we somehow get public service announcements. I don't know how you go about getting that done, that actually puts that number out there and says, you know, it's 10%. We have 10% more fatal accidents in Sedgwick County versus Johnson County because of lack of seatbelt use. You know, I don't know, maybe there's somebody who's more marketing person can put that together, but I think that would be a great thing to help our citizens understand. This isn't just a motto of the police. It really does result in more deaths.
If you don't mind me speaking up, so at KDOT, we've been focusing on Sedgwick County for a while, but trying to think like, what can we do out of headquarters? So we initiated a campaign called Drive Safe Sedgwick. So you'll you'll see some ad buys. We largely are using sports venues. And the coalition that we really focused on impaired driving. So that's the start of that Drive Safe Sedgwick campaign. But we've been having some initial conversations with WAMPO staff about actually creating kind of a long-term coalition structure down in Sedgwick County where you can have kind of diverse representation of traffic safety partners and figuring out like, what is the next campaign? And, how do we focus on targeted messaging just for Sedgwick County? So if you haven't seen the Drive Safe Sedgwick stuff, I'll share that also with staff. And so then they can at least send you that, but that's kind of the start of the focus is trying to get targeted campaigning to Sedgwick County.
Thank you. Councilmember Fry and our Park and Recreations Director were in a car accident in 2020 heading to Topeka. Thank goodness we all had our seatbelts on. I was even in the back seat and had my seatbelt on. If not, I probably would have gone through the windshield realistically. Ended up in the emergency room, and we came back from that experience and made a PSA at the city of Wichita talking about wear your seatbelt every ride, every time, every seat, no matter where you're sitting in the car. So we have that available. Maybe Council Fry, we dust that off and play it again. But I think as electeds, we have a voice, and maybe this is a good opportunity to share it. Thank you, Vanessa. This was fascinating. I really appreciate it. And I want to applaud WAMPO staff because the genesis of this was that you asked the question and asked KDOT to give us information. So thank you for being forward thinking and getting.
I have a question as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm looking at one of the slides, and it talks about the pedestrians and cyclists, intersection related, run off road, right or left, and on it goes. But there's nothing on here about distracted driving or DUI. And I would think that has to be something that's looked at as well as a major factor. I don't know if it's a difference between Sedgwick County and Johnson County or not, but certainly distracted driving or DUI, I would think would have to be on this list.
Impaired driving is on there. We don't have inattention on there.
Okay.
But we can certainly take another look too and give you guys the statistics for inattention. I will say that as the presentation alluded to earlier, it ends up being a very large percentage of our crash reports in Kansas say inattention, and it can be the testimony of the the folks that see the incident and indicate somebody was inattention. But sometimes officers also, they arrive at the scene, they say, the street's dry, you can see for miles, what else caused it? And so sometimes that inattention box gets checked that way as well. So I caution using it sometimes.
Is inattention the same thing as distracted? I mean, is that?
Yes. Yeah. On our crash report, it's just called inattention, but it's the same thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any anecdotal evidence that there's a difference between Sedgwick County and Johnson County on that issue of distraction or inattention?
I don't know. Let me take a look at it and then we can provide that to staff. So I'm going to write a note for that.
That'd be great. Thank you very much. That's all my questions. Thank you, Chair Tuttle.
Thank you, Commissioner Howell. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you again, Vanessa. We appreciate your time and joining us today. Last on our updates and discussion items, innovation and innovative projects in the greater Wichita area. The Small Business Digital Transformation Program, Troy Tabor from the city of Andover. Looking forward to your presentation.
Me too. After that, that was a little bit depressing, I think, but it's an actionable thing that we can look at that and understand the data and maybe make some changes in the way that we attack safety. I would also say that we've had probably hundreds, if not thousands of hours of data just thrown at us in about an hour and a half. And so everyone that's been a piece of that, we love it. We appreciate it. It's all actionable. And when we do have, some questions about some things that might not be there, it's not anything against anybody doing the work. It's just, we just had other ideas. So don't take it personal at all. Everybody has this digital maturity level on their desks there. I didn't bring them for everybody. There's a slide for that later. It's interesting. Data is the last thing on here at the bottom of the slide, but it really helps to drive home how important it is to gather the type of information that you just saw. So I'm here today. Again, I'm Troy Tabor. I represent humbly the city of Andover. I've been on WAMPO board for a while. Also a part of the League of Kansas Municipalities. So I'm able to represent all of us here at a state level as well. It's a lot of hats that I wear, but through all of that, I'm also, or in addition to all that, I'm part of the Wichita State University at the Center for Entrepreneurship. I'm the director there, and I help entrepreneurs and small businesses in different areas of growth, whether you're a startup or an existing company. And I'll tell you, I want to big shout out to Wichita for even allowing us to do a program like this. It would not exist without the city of Wichita's grant. It's an ARPA-funded program. $1 million went to Center for Entrepreneurship, really 600,000 passed through right to the businesses. And since I have a tech background, this was like in my wheelhouse, which is a transformation and growth. It's digital transformation program. And I don't see the right, oh, maybe this will do it. Oh, look at that. I can do technology. Okay, so the small business digital transformation program, as I mentioned, is funded through an ARPA grant. We have one primary goal that we try to get through with this program, which is employment growth in the city of Wichita, and also building business resilience. So those are the primary goals we're shooting for, and we're using technology to try to get there. The idea is for it to be a 1 to 5 year program to digitally transform the thinking and the mindset and the culture of businesses to achieve those goals. And we think it'll take 1 to 5 years to accomplish that. So what is digital transformation? And honestly, there's probably 100 different definitions, and they're probably valid in whatever area that they're being focused on. For me, I look at it as the integration of technology into all areas of businesses, changing how you operate to meet business goals, deliver value to customers. And most importantly, it's a cultural change. We looked at all this data that we gathered earlier today, and what do you do with it? Right? It's like, that's great information. It's really useful to tell us where we're at, but it's much more useful to tell us where we need to go. And that's the cultural difference. And that's the transformative way to look at that data we looked at. So it's a culture change of the entire business that requires organizations to challenge the status quo, and experiment with new technologies. I thought I'd have fun with this a little bit, and I thought, okay, well, I'm here with a lot of communities, and how can I change this? And by the way, I used a tool I'll talk about later to rewrite it to say this, but digital transformation is the adoption of digital technology to enhance government operations and optimize stewardship of public resources. It involves a cultural shift towards embracing innovation, iterative improvement, and making informed decisions in the public interest. So I feel like that's very much what we're about, meaning that we also can look at digital transformation, and I'd recommend it as you go through strategic planning for our different cities and counties in the state to really look at this as some way or a method of achieving your goals, and not just, I don't know, not using technology to do that. So in achieving the goals of business employment and resilience, we think that by going through the program, which I'll explain how the program works, but it's really the idea of instilling the digital mindset, understanding that it takes a cultural shift to look at digital technologies first to try to solve all solutions, although they won't solve all solutions, but you should look there first, and why, and then some processes to go through to help that be easier, ways to look at your business, which could be translated to look at your city as well if you want. So again, long-term vision is growing our digital maturity, which is the handout I gave. If looking at the average digital maturity of the 27 businesses that have went through this program so far, we're about a 1.5 to 2 on our digital maturity level for those businesses. And they're small businesses. A lot of times in any business, we look at what we need to do to hustle and get that next dollar, to pay the employees, to try to figure out how to make sure all the products are coming in and going out. We don't necessarily take or have the time to step back for a moment and really work on our business instead of in it. And this program is one of those programs that allows you to work on your business for a bit. So the long-term vision is to grow us from a 1.5 in the city of Wichita to maybe a 2.5, maybe a 3 would be amazing. Getting to 4 is really challenging, but I feel like if we were to elevate the digital maturity of all industries in Wichita and Wichita itself, that does nothing but make us a better place to move to, the expectations of the employees and how digital savvy they are, as well as the businesses, and then the customer's expectations with all that put together, we think that is something that can grow the city in a lot of ways. There's a lot of focus today on the larger businesses, getting the Cargills here, getting the big Amazon and the chip factories and that kind of thing. That's wonderful. As far as the small businesses, I get to work with that though. And there's over 80% of employment is from small business. And this is one of the programs we get to do to work on growing that, just like we're growing the other larger businesses. So the first class started in October of last year. Again, 27 have completed. Currently have 9 in the current program that's running this month. And then we have 86 applicants so far. And I haven't marketed at all. It was just a nice Wichita Business Journal article and then a little bit of word of mouth. Honestly, I can only manage 60 applicants because that's all the funding we have for now, but I'm working on trying to make this a long-term program so we can really see results. That's part of why I'm here today, but more importantly, is to talk to you about what we're doing at Wichita State and for the region. So the impact on small businesses, our vision is to hit at least 400 businesses over the next 5 years. We think that's a good number to look at and actually see transformation start happening, not just 5 or 10 or 20 or 50, but a few hundred, and you'll really see a difference, a change in the way that we're looked at as a city in a region and the way that the business community is looked at. So the transformative impact and business resilience and customer expectations is what I focus on. And when I focus on with the business, it's like, what is the point of adding a technology? It's not smart to just add a new technology for the sake of it. It's really smart to think of what your long-term strategies are. And we focus the strategies in our program on the impact of the business resilience and customer expectation, and then look for technology that can help fill that and make that a reality. So we look at also strengthening the employees and the business technical skills through this. So if you go through a program like this, you learn things. If you're an employee, you learn new systems, you learn how to transform, and hopefully you'll pull out of it how to transform yourself somewhat too, to look to see what's there for you. And there's a lot of tools for that, a lot of great books for that, which I'll be happy to share with you at some point if you'd like. Of course, growing employment is a big, the win in all of this. Some of the takeaways of the Small Business Digital Transformation Program, I mentioned partnership with City of Wichita and the Center for Entrepreneurship. It's a forward-looking focus on job force and technical growth and business resilience. And I'm working to continue the program and expand the program beyond the borders of Wichita. After we've done this for a year, we proved the systems, have great results, which we've already got a few really amazing results from this. And as far as the way the program works, it's 4 weeks. It's not a massive commitment up front. It is a commitment to the business shift and how you'll change. The idea is to train the business and the business owners, and we work with the execs of them on how to look at what digital technologies could be a part of their strategy. And we do that through a tool called the Business Model Canvas, which is a tool we use at the Center for Entrepreneurship and several of our programs for businesses. It's not a business plan. It's a one sheet, and it shows how the business functions, the customers, how you work with, provide value to the customers, and then everything it takes in order to create whatever your service is, your product is. So all your costs, and then how you can see opportunity with all of that to be better. And we look at digital transformations to do that. At the end of the program, the idea is to have identified one or more digital transformations that will be impactful on your business. And that plan is what the business gives to us as a final turn in. You could say it's like a final for your class. And we use that to award the award from the program, which currently is $10,000 for the businesses that go through it and complete the program. So that's the main part of the program. And the last, I wanted to show you something technical, although I don't see a keyboard. Is it down here? Yes. So I would be remiss if I didn't pull out something that everybody loves called ChatGPT. So who here has used it? Show of hands. 1, 2, maybe. That doesn't make me happy. You're kidding me right now. Okay.
No, but this is your chance to educate us.
So I was thinking about how I could do that. And I'm like, okay, I came up with a couple of prompts, what I'm calling it, which is questions on what it can do. And I'm like, okay, so for this audience, what would be a great use for, okay, YouTube, hold on, I gotta see, I'm secure here. What am I doing? YouTube, okay. ChatGPT, and so if I can do this at the same time that I'm trying to do this, I would say ChatGPT is something that is scary to most people because it seems like it's an artificial intelligence. It's going to take over the world, and we're not going to have jobs anymore, and all these things. And that is not what it is at all. It is absolutely just a tool, just like your calculator is a tool. Think about this thing right here that no one can live without today. This is a digital transformation. You buy products through it, you book trips through it, you communicate with it, you read websites. This is one of the probably world-changing digital transformations that happen in our time. And I would certainly say that this ChatGPT is another. To take away some of the magic of ChatGPT and this type of artificial intelligence, I would say that all it is it's taking the entire, probably every book ever written, all of the online subject matter experts in pretty much anything, all the science publications, all the chats back and forth that are online about pretty much any subject. No, why are we doing that? Okay, I'll get back to this. And it indexes it all very much the way that Google has indexed all of the websites and allows you to type a few words and then it'll give you the website results. But what this does a little different is it actually has been coded to try to act like a human in the way it responds. So instead of it giving you a whole bunch of just website links per se, it's actually thinking. It's not thinking like a human thinks. But every single word that's going to pop up in the screen in a second in response to what I put in, every single word is a math. It's just math. It comes up with a probability of what the next word is based on all the indexed data that it has out there. And then it prints that word. And then it comes up with a probability of what's the next word. And it just keeps doing that. And by the way, that's kind of how humans think, by the way. Everything that's coming out of my mouth right now, except the stuttering, I guess, is because my brain is created a probability of what I should say next, and then I say it. And that's what this does. So what I thought of, and I'm like, okay, what am I going to show off here that might be interesting? And one of them, I had two good ones. This is what they call a prompt. And if you know what a prompt is, it's simply what you type in order for it to give you a response. And there's a whole new field called prompt engineering, and all the English majors now have great jobs. I'm just saying that. So anyway, so what I put here on this one is, we want to understand the different types of road intersections, including options such as four-way stops, stoplights, roundabouts, and other options not listed. We'd like to know the options, including information such as which options has the best accident reduction result, which has the best traffic flow, the comparative cost of each, etc. We'd like this to be for a city government, so it needs to cover all of this and be easily understandable by council members like me, who are not experts, but want to make an informed decision on which way to choose for an intersection project. And I got to think this is something that we've probably all asked our engineers in our cities and and counties and stuff to do. So then you do that and it says, okay, I got you. And it goes out and it reads all this information that it found online. And by the way, while it's doing this, as far as digital transformation and all the businesses going through what my program, this is a pretty large piece of a discussion for one day, is how is this tool useful as a transformation for you to achieve your goals? And yeah, I'm looking at the time too. So I won't take till 5 o'clock, I promise. But you can see the way that it's responding and it's going through and it's building something unique. It's building it unique because, again, it's taking like the probability of what the next word would be. It's not copying and pasting from something that exists. It's looking at 10,000 different discussions about the question I just gave it, and it's getting the probability of what the next word should be, and it's responding with that. A little scary. It's just a tool. It's just a tool. It allows us to accomplish things way faster, better, be smarter, that kind of thing. At the end of this, I'm not going to type it, but you could even say, cite all the resources that gave you this information. And then you have the ability to go back and look at that for more information if you want. Something else that's kind of scary, that is scary, is since it has indexed pretty much everything, it also indexed everything that's wrong that's out there. So some of the results absolutely are false, the opposite of what they really should be. So you can't just copy and paste this. It's not 100% accurate. So when you see things that are wrong, by the way, you can say, well, no, actually that's wrong, and here's why. It'll apologize, go find the right information and fix it, which is also interesting, I think. So this is This is ChatGPT. For those that you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend diving into it, talking to it, understanding how it works. I could do a workshop on that if you want. But it's all about the questions you ask and how you ask them. And I'm going to go ahead and throw the other one up, and you can copy and paste this later. We can use this. And I mean, for WAMPO, we could even say we could copy and paste our entire everything of WAMPO, all of our data information, and say, okay, create the projects we should work on. I'm not saying we do that, but it certainly could do it, by the way. So the last time I put it here is the city of Wichita. And I was thinking about the BIL, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and then water is a challenge for Andover and everybody else. And I was like, okay, well, how could I like ask it an actual question that's useful for that? And I made up some of these numbers, but I'm like, man, we have 4 golf courses around us that could all use reclaimed water instead of using the city of Wichita's water, right? And that would help. And we also have a new small lake that's going in as part of a park. We really should be figuring out how to put water in there without it just being the wells and using the city of Wichita. So I asked it that. I said, we're a city, how big we are. We have these golf courses. There's water. We don't want to use drinkable water anymore. And I said, you are a top grant writer. So you can tell it what personality to take on, because it's indexed all this information. So I said, you're a top grant writer who specializes in large grants for the state of Kansas. This bill will be written to the Commerce Department. Actually, I'm going to change that to grant. This grant will be written to the Commerce Department of the state of Kansas, who is managing federal funds for projects such as this. Total cost estimate to be $8 million. I really made that up totally. I said, can you please write the grant for me? Sure. Here's your grant.
Oh my God.
So this again pulls from a lot of grants that have been published and written and out there. And when you get things like this, by the way, and I would caution again, not to just copy and paste, it's probably going to be fairly basic. And then as you read it though, that's just done several hours worth of work for me or more. And then I would refine it. And I would say, well, project overview is too bland. I'd like you to spice it up with, these words. It will do that. I will rewrite it in the way that you want. You could say, well, you're not pulling enough information to provide me the data I need in order to, prove this objective. And it'll go find it and it'll put it in here. I mean, it's pretty amazing tool. Everybody's staring at this now. Okay. So you can see it happen. And so that was a project that I think that all of us would find useful to write for a grant. So in conclusion, the hope with the program, again, big thanks and shout out to the city of Wichita for helping fund this program, is to instill digital transformation and the digital mindset into the businesses and help them to achieve some of the goals using digital technology and move all of our digital maturity level up in our area. Any questions? Any questions for ChatGPT? No, you can do that on your own. Okay. Thank you very much.
Great job, Troy. Thank you. That was fascinating and frightening all at the same time. And as a low tech person, especially, but thank you for being the first one to kick off our series for this year, talking about innovation and innovative projects in our area. So great job. Thank you. Thank you. We will now go into committee partnership updates regarding the executive committee. The next executive committee is May 4th at 11 a.m. It will be in this building and anyone is welcome. It is an open meeting. You do not have to be a member of the executive committee to join or participate. So if you'd like to do that, let me know. And I know Troy will be joining us virtually at that meeting. So we'll have a virtual option available as well. So if you need that, let us know. Do we have Crystal with us for the transportation spotlight?
We do.
Okay.
Thank you all for inviting me to speak today. Ashley had asked us as transportation providers within the WAMPO area to just talk about our transportation services that are available, with the hope that the more we educate people about what is available in our area, then hopefully that can lead to better regional coordination between all of us. So I am Crystal Knowles, and I'm the director of the Butler County Department on Aging. And then on the next slide, you will see all the different services that are offered by Butler County Department on Aging. So we are offering information and assistance. We have in-home service programs. We have volunteer programs. If you want to advance that next slide. We also have caregiver programs. We do some prevention of elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. And then somewhere in the middle of all of those services, we also provide transportation. So transportation, you can go to the next slide. Transportation by no means is an afterthought. It's very important, and it does fit in with all the different services that we offer. The difference with the transportation program that we operate is that it is the only program that we do that is general public. It is open to all ages. It is funded through the Federal Transportation Administration, as well as the state of Kansas. KDOT puts some money into that program, and then county mill levy also supports that program. So we are the only form of general public transportation in the entire county of Butler. So we cover a very large area. We do this with two different types of grant funding. One is our 5311 Rural Transportation Grant. And with that, we serve the city of Augusta and the city of El Dorado Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 4. And we provide about an average of 80 rides a day through those two services. Then we receive a grant through the city of Wichita, pass-through grant, which is 5307 funding, which allows us to serve the city of Andover from 9 to 3 Monday through Friday. We also transport from town to town, from Augusta to Andover, from El Dorado to Andover, Augusta to El Dorado, just depending on what the need is out there. And then twice a week, we pick up all over the county and we take folks into Wichita. And so that in itself is a huge feat to try to coordinate appointments, be able to get everybody scheduled because obviously we can't run back and forth between our different cities and Wichita. So we pick everyone up, we get them all dropped off at their appointments, we wait till everyone's done, pick them all back up and take them back home. So we do this, and we do any other transportation requests that we get. We try really hard to be the people that don't, the first words out of our mouth isn't we don't do that, or no, we can't do that. If we have the availability, if we have the drivers and we have the vehicles, then it is our goal to try to meet whatever transportation needs crop up in our community. We are a curb to curb service, so people call our office. We do all of the scheduling in our office. And then our drivers are equipped with technology, with tablets, so their schedule pops up for them for the day. So we schedule all of their rides out. We schedule all of those return trips home when people are ready to go home. And all that's done, like I said, through our office. They call in and talk to one of our staff. So we have 7 vehicles in our fleet currently. We have 5 minibuses. We have 1 minivan and a Ford Transit, which is more of a full-size van, but all of our vehicles are wheelchair lift equipped. So we provide general public transportation, but also the paratransit, and there's really no distinction made between any of it. Anyone who needs that wheelchair lift has access to it, since all of our vehicles are lift equipped. So the price is the same. We don't ask for any type of application for paratransit services. We charge 50 cents a ride in town, and we charge $2 between towns and $4 each way to Wichita. So it's a very affordable transportation option. But this really fits in, like I said, with what we do, because if we're planning on our folks being able to age in place and stay in the communities and continue to live in the communities where they grew up, then we have to have access to services, and our transportation program is able to provide that. Next slide. I gave you kind of a list of all the different services that we provide. So the staff in our office, we have 15 staff total with the Department on Aging. We have 8 full-time people in the office and 1 part-time person and 6 part-time drivers. But that means that 9 of our 15 staff are dedicated just to doing transportation. It is a very big program. We gave an average of 20,000 rides a year is pretty average for us. So 16,000 come from Andover, El Dorado, those town-to-town trips. Another 3,200 comes from our Andover transportation, and another 800 trips are taking folks in and out of Wichita. So do you have any questions for us on our transportation service?
Any questions for Crystal? Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing and especially making sure that we have transportation for our most vulnerable in our community, maybe BVI, or as you mentioned, as people are aging in place. So thank you for all you do.
We appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk with you guys about what transportation services exist so we can get better at coordinating those services. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Have a great day. I just want to make a correction in for the minutes, especially the executive committee is May 4th at 2 p.m. We moved it because some executive committee members had another commitment. So it's May 4th at 2 p.m. if you'd like to join us. Thank you to my colleagues for keeping me on track. Next, we're almost done. Kansas Department of Transportation, Allison Smith.
Yeah, just a real quick mention. We opened up our call for projects for our NEVI program. That's our National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure program that was part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. And we're doing it in a phased approach. First is a concept form where we just give some technical assistance and that kind of thing, and then an application form. This is pertaining primarily to the alternative fuel corridors that have been identified in the state, of which 54-400 is one. We do have 2 webinars scheduled, one on Thursday afternoon, one on Friday morning, and we do have a lot of information on our Charge Up Kansas website. And then I know I forwarded the email to staff, so perhaps they might be able to forward it out as well. But that is what we are looking to do and have it all wrapped up late summer.
Excellent. Very important topic. Any questions or comments for Allison?
And it also doesn't, I would mention, it does include some community charging. We have some other funding available to us. So it's not just on the outfield corridors. So that's also a possibility.
Outstanding. Thank you, Allison. Thanks for hanging with us to the very end.
Sure.
Tom is not with us today. Is that correct? Awesome. So last but not least, Federal Highway Administration, Rick or Cecily, are you with us for an update? Don't think so. Okay. We'll catch them next month for sure. Seeing no other agenda items, the next meeting will be May 9th at 3 p.m. So we'll look forward to seeing you right back here in a month for more great information and updates. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn. A second? All those in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? You can stay. Have a great day. And look, we have 3 minutes left if anybody wants to hang out.